this is Addie D. Hilster, and we're at Spiral Path Yoga Center today, and we're going to be practicing Mini Yin number 2. So this is a shorter Yin Yoga practice, and I hope you'll enjoy working with the breath in this soft and gentle approach to yoga today. So let's jump right in, and we'll do a little bit of movement just to kind of find our way into the body, and then we'll settle into a handful of really great yin poses. So let's start with a seated cat-cow, and you might want to sit up on a blanket or two just to give you a little bit of extra height underneath the hips, and this can be helpful for allowing the pelvis to move with us and giving us some freedom to move the spine in this way. So seated cat-cow, we'll take the hands onto the shins. We'll inhale and take the belly and chest forward and the shoulders back, and the chin could lift a little bit. And we'll exhale and round the spine and let the chin drop down. So moving with your own breath rhythm, inhales bring you forward. This is like cow pose. The exhales, you round the spine like cat pose. Inhaling and arching, exhaling and rounding. You don't have to be doing this at the exact time that I'm doing it, but just finding the rhythm of your own breath and following that pace. Let's take 2 more, feeling the breath move through this shape as you're arching and rounding the spine. Noticing any particular signals, information from the body that you want to carry into your practice. And then when you come back to center, we'll do one more movement from the seated position. This is called Sufi rolls. So you come forward like before, but then you shift over to one side. You round as you come around the back, and then you come around the other side. The inhale is as you're circling around the front. The exhale is as you're circling around the back. And again, we'll each be guided by the rhythm of our own breath and the intuitive pace that the body wants to follow. So you're feeling your way into all of the different sensations that this seems to bring up, wherever those are for you. That might be in the waist and the low back, it might be in the hips, shoulders. Before we change directions, let's come back to center and change up the cross of the legs. The other shin would go in front this time. And then we'll inhale forward and lean towards the other side, and then roll around the back. And inhale, come around the front. So breath is steady. We're using that as our guide, along with the sensations in the body as we move through the pose. And tuning in that way, you notice certain spots want a little more attention, so you can shift a little bit. You can emphasize a little more shoulder or hip or neck. Making it your own as we take our last couple of circles. And then let's come back to center. Just pause and sit for a moment, feeling your way up and down the spine. Feeling into any other areas of interest that got your attention in those movements. we're making this internal connection as we dive into these longer held yin poses. So we'll start with Sphinx pose, a very classic yin pose. And I'll show it to you in the kind of basic way, and also with some prop options if you want to make it a little more comfortable depending on what you've got going on in your body. And as a side note, I have a few props with me here for this practice, but you can use whatever you have, and it depends on how it kind of works out in your body when you come into the pose. So there's not one set way that you would use the props. You need to kind of play and construct different things with your, available blankets and blocks and things to support yourself in the individual way you need to support yourself in each pose. So back to Sphinx. For this pose, we're going to come onto the belly, and I'm going to have a couple of folded blankets nearby me to show you what I might do with those, and I'm going to have one of my blocks ready. And then coming onto the belly, the tops of the feet are on the ground, the legs are on the ground, the pelvis is on the ground, and a good starting place is having the elbows underneath the shoulders. The hand position doesn't matter so much. You could have your palms together in this Anjali Mudra. It's a nice way. Or you could wrap your hands around the elbows. And this is my favorite. I just feel a little more supported there, but it's a personal preference. This is the basic Sphinx pose. So you can take a few breaths and observe what it's like here. Just keeping the neck in alignment with the spine so the head's not hanging too much and it's not looking up too much. And feeling back into the low back and noticing what the intensity level is like there. And if it feels a little bit too strong, an easy adjustment is just to walk the elbows a little bit more forward. Gives you a little more slack in the low back. And see how that feels. And sometimes we struggle with kind of holding ourselves up in the shoulders here. So an option could be to bring a support underneath the rib cage to just do a little bit more of the work of holding you in the shape. So I've got two blankets that I'm just dragging across the mat here. So I'm going to come back down so that my lower ribs are resting on the blankets and then my elbows come down in front. You can play with that to find what's comfortable there. And then I have very little weight on my arms now. Okay, so you could choose to try this or not. Either way is fine. This is a little bit more passive. More passive is a little more yin-like. So the other option with the block is for alleviating tension in the neck and shoulders from holding the head up. So you can take the block on its tall end, and I would turn it at an angle towards you so that you're not resting your forehead into the edge of the block here, but a little bit more of that flat surface. And then just let your head dip forward. I really felt my breath release just when I let my head touch the block. So that's a sign of finding a bit more of a yin-like place in this pose. So we'll take a little time here in whichever combination of this that you have arrived in for yourself. And to the degree possible, let the body soften. There are two ways that we work with the breath in yoga. Sometimes we breathe in a deliberate and purposeful way to enhance the breath pattern, to extend the breath pattern, to balance the breath pattern. And other times we just let the breath be natural and we observe. So we'll try moving between both of those modes of breath enhancement and breath observation. So as you're resting in this Sphinx pose, take 3 breaths in a more deliberate way. A full breath in and a long breath out. Guiding the breath into particular spaces in the pose where it feels good to go. And then after that 3rd breath, simply allow the next breath to emerge on its own, however it shows up. And notice that you can still have your full attention with the breath, even when you're not controlling it. Watching with interest as the breath flows in. It creates space in the body, creates movement in the body. And watching with interest as the breath flows out, and maybe there's softening along with that, letting go along with that. And we're not making this happen right now, we're just sensing this natural pattern in the body. The breath breathes itself. And then it's time to come out of Sphinx pose. So if you're using the props, you can set those aside for now. Or if you're on the blankets, just use your hands underneath the shoulders to help you lift up. Let's come to hands and knees. And let's circle the hips around a few times. Just make it a small circle. You're noticing where you are. Circling both directions a few times. And then sit in an easy position. Feeling the reverberations of that pose internally. So our next pose will be a twist using a blanket as a spacer between the knees. And this is optional, but I find it really helpful to assist on the alignment in the pose. And it keeps the legs about hips width apart from each other, so it can be protective if you have SI joint issues, sacroiliac stuff, or low back stuff going on. So I've got one blanket for my head. If you like, you can use one too. And the other blanket, the one that's the spacer, is going to go between my feet, my bent knees, and my thighs like that. So then we'll come up to the back. We'll do a little lift and shift of the hips to further align before we come all the way into the twist. So that's a kind of a micro movement. And you just lift the pelvis up, and then we're going to take it a tad over to the left. So just that little shift. And then place back down where most of the weight's on the right side. So then take the arms out next to you, bring the knees up, and exhale and lower the legs to the right. So that lift and shift just got us in position for that. So the bottom leg is completely resting on the ground. The top leg should be resting on top of the blanket now, including the foot. And if you feel a little bit of kind of lift in this back shoulder, you might want to press your hands down and pick up both shoulders, lengthen and rotate just a little bit more, and exhale. Let's see if you can settle just a little bit more into that rotated shape. There are other ways you could adjust this twist, maybe by putting a block under this knee if this is too deep. Feel free to play with it and see what you can figure out that works for you. Okay, so the head could be turned to the side or neutral. And we'll take a few deliberate breaths here, our purposeful, intentional breathing. Let's take about 3 breaths like that. Filling the space on the inhale and softening and releasing on the exhale. And then after the 3rd breath, see if you can let go of any control or influence over the breath, the breathing, and just let the breath emerge however it is that it shows up. So mindful attention to the breath, almost as if we were practicing a mindfulness meditation rather than a pranayama. And we notice sometimes the breath is long, sometimes the breath is short. Sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's subtle. Letting the body be as passive as possible here, no effort needed. The locations in the body where you notice the breath might shift and change as you observe. Maybe you were noticing the breath in your rib cage and now you notice it in your shoulder, for example. Let's take 3 more deliberate breaths, coming back to our purposeful yogi breathing. Deliberate doesn't have to mean forceful, but just that we are moving the breath with intention. And one more time, breathing in. Breathing out. And then on an in-breath, set the blanket aside and bring the knees back up to center. Pause here. Let the feet rest on the ground and take a little time to absorb and notice the flow of sensations as you come out of that twist to the first side. Interesting to observe the effect of the pose after you've practiced one. And then And getting ready for the second side, we'll put the blanket back in between the feet, the knees, and the thighs. So you're holding it there. It's approximately hip width apart with the legs with the blanket here. And of course you could adjust the folds and everything like that to work for you. And then coming into this pose, let's do our lift and shift again. So your feet are on the ground so that you lift your pelvis up and you tilt a little bit more to the right now so that weight comes down more on the left side of the pelvis. So temporarily I'm a little off center to help the alignment. And then bring the knees up, take in a breath. Exhale and lower the legs to the left so that bottom leg comes all the way to the ground. We want to be completely restful and using the ground for support, using our props for support so that we can embody that yin-like quality of passivity and softness and releasing muscle effort. We can also adjust from the top part of the pose by lifting a little bit and the shoulders lengthening, turning so that the back shoulder drops towards the floor. If the back shoulder is quite high up, try elevating this knee here. You can put a little blanket or block under. Notice you're like a seesaw. So if you lift the knees, it will help you shift the balance and rotate your rib cage back more. And it's also possible to put a blanket under this back arm, especially if the chest feels too tight here. So lots of options are possible. Once you've found what works, then you can come to rest in the pose. And let's work with our two modes of breathing, starting with the more deliberate breath, the enhancement breathing. Let's take 3 breaths that way, consciously expanding the breath and breathing with intention. But staying relaxed as you do that. Doesn't have to be forceful, but just conscious and intentional. Exploring the contours of the pose with that intentional breath. And then once you've done that for a few moments, soften the breath, let go of being in charge of how the breath flows. And trust that the body will continue to breathe itself. Noticing how the mind responds to this practice of staying with and observing the breath. When there's nothing to do, there's nothing to improve or change about the breath. Sometimes it's harder at first for us to stay interested when we don't have a project. So anytime you notice the mind wandering away, just patiently come back. Become curious again about this natural flow of breath.
So let's remove the blanket and let's take an inhale to bring the legs back up. Place the feet back on the mat. Take one conscious and deliberate breath here. And then release again to simple observation. Then let's roll to the side and come up.
And we'll take one more yin pose. And this one is a seated butterfly forward fold. So here's where you really might get creative in using your props to help support you to make this a little bit more restful and yin-like. So I would suggest sitting on the edge of one of your blankets or both of your blankets if you particularly have a tendency for the body to roll backward in the twist, in the forward fold. It's not a twist. I'm going to turn sideways so that you can see, I think, better from this angle. And I'm sitting on the blanket, and then we're going to bring the soles of the feet together in front of us, and they're out a little bit at a distance, so not super close to us like you might do in a more young hatha class, but outward to kind of a diamond shape. So a couple of things you could do here to support the knees might be using a folded blanket underneath one knee or a block underneath one knee, something like that. Okay? Depending on how you're going to use your other props. So let's say that I'm using blocks under my knees, and when I fold forward, lifting and tilting, and if my edge is just a little bit like right here, I'm starting to feel that stretch. Maybe I stay here and bring a bolster if one is available, or a chair if one is available, and I tilt the bolster if I'm using that so it's at an angle and my head can rest on it. And this makes quite a difference in the feeling of relaxation when the head can be down and supported. It avoids overstretching the back of the neck, which is really good. Or let's say that you want to come a little bit further forward, you're able to come a little further forward in this. You could take blocks, if you have two blocks, and put them in front of you and make a bolster table. And the bolster could go across. This could also work with a chair seat as well, just sliding it a little further out. Blocks could be on one height taller, or on this medium level, or the lower level. And you might fold forward here, bringing the head down. So for me today, I'm going to add one more blanket to that to find just about the right height. And then we'll settle in for a little bit, practice our breathing here. Take a few more deliberate in and out breaths, noticing where the breath wants to flow, exploring the shape and outline of the pose with your deliberate breath. When it feels right, let go of breathing in that deliberate and purposeful way and simply let the body breathe itself. We can still stay conscious of the breath and connected to the breath even when we're not in charge of the breath. And often when the body is becoming calmer and more relaxed, the breath quiets, becomes softer and more subtle. So we can allow that to happen. Staying interested in the breath, however it's showing up. Let's take a few more deliberate breaths again, shifting back to that more purposeful mode of breathing. With an inhale, let's rise back up to release this pose, and any props you were using, you can set those out of the way. Let's lean back onto the hands, stretch the legs out. Maybe move the legs in and out, rolling the bones, or bring the knees up and do a little windshield wiper movement. These releases can also be made your own because you're following your intuition and providing relief in the body where it's needed. So we'll finish with Shavasana, and you can come down to your mat to rest in any way that you like. If you have the props available, you can choose to use those. Like a bolster under the knees is really, really nice, or a blanket there. A blanket under the head is nice. But simple is good too. And we'll come down and settle in. Maybe letting those first few breaths be more deliberate. But then settling in Shavasana to an uncontrived breath, an uncontrolled breath. Becoming aware of what it's like to just be a conscious body that's breathing itself. So we'll take a little bit more time resting here in Shavasana. In fact, you can take as long as you have, another 10 minutes, another 5 minutes if possible. Enjoying Shavasana as a reclining meditation. And I will leave you here in this pose. When when you do come out, bring yourself out really gently, really slowly. And I'll close while you're resting a little longer, hopefully, with a poem by Dana Faulds. And this is called It Is Enough. It is enough right now to taste one moment of peace. Of course I want more, but at least the door is open. It is enough to draw a conscious breath and let my hands relax, fingers releasing their tight grasp on things outside my control. It is enough to shed a layer of stress as if taking off a jacket or a pair of too tight shoes. Ease of being has to start somewhere. This breath is my first step. Enjoy your Shavasana, and thank you for your presence and practice today. Namaste.